In 2016, Britain built almost 900,000 cars. This year, that number is on track to fall below 372,000. That's not a bad quarter. That's the lowest level of British car production in 70 years, lower than during the depths of the 2008 financial crisis, lower than during COVID lockdowns. Honda's Swindon plant, gone. 3,500 jobs lost. British Volt, the company meant to build Britain's electric car batteries, collapsed before it built a single one. Vauxhall's Luton factory, open for over a century, now facing the axe. And just this year, Car Giant, one of the biggest used car dealers in the country, closed for good. This isn't one bad company making one bad decision. This is an entire industry, the industry that once defined British manufacturing, quietly failing at scale. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Let's start with a number that explains everything. British car production has fallen from almost 900,000 vehicles in 2016 to roughly 372,000 in the first half of 2026, and industry figures released by the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders confirm this is the lowest output Britain has recorded in around 70 years. This isn't a small dip. This is a collapse of more than half the industry's output in under a decade. And it isn't isolated to one factory or one company. It's happening across the entire supply chain in regions that built entire local economies around it: the Midlands, the North East, South Wales, Sunderland, Swindon, Bridgend, Luton. Exports make up more than 80% of what Britain still produces, with over half of that heading to the EU, meaning Britain's car industry is now almost entirely dependent on demand and trade conditions it doesn't control, rather than a thriving domestic market of its own. Behind that statistic are real specific collapses that used to be front page news on their own. Honda's Swindon plant closed in 2021 after 36 years, taking 3,500 jobs with it. The company said the decision reflected global production strategy, consolidating European manufacturing back to Japan. British Volt, the company that was supposed to build Britain's first major electric vehicle battery gigafactory in Northumberland, collapsed into administration before producing a single commercial battery. The reason was brutally simple. The factory would have run at a loss for years until the EV market matured enough to fill its order book, and investors weren't willing to wait that long. Vauxhall's Luton plant, owned by Stellantis, has faced closure threats despite over a century of production history in the town. And earlier this year, Car Giant, a nearly 50-acre site in West London that once stocked over 2,000 vehicles, one of the biggest used car dealerships in the entire country, shut its doors for the final time, putting more than 500 jobs at risk. Here's the mechanism at the centre of this crisis: the UK's zero-emission vehicle mandate. A government-set quota requiring an increasing percentage of every manufacturer's UK sales to be fully electric each year, with financial penalties for missing the target. The logic behind it is straightforward. Push manufacturers toward EVs faster. The problem is what it does to a manufacturer that can't hit the target through genuine consumer demand alone. UK consumers have been slower to switch to EVs than the mandate assumes, held back by charging infrastructure that's still patchy outside major cities, and by upfront EV prices that remain a real barrier for a lot of buyers. When demand doesn't match the mandate, manufacturers are left having to discount EVs artificially just to hit their quota, cut production of profitable petrol and diesel models to avoid penalties, or in the worst cases, scale back UK operations entirely. Layer onto that a wave of lower-priced Chinese EV manufacturers rapidly expanding into the European market, undercutting established brands on price at exactly the moment those brands are already spending billions retooling factories for electric production. And layer on rising industrial energy costs, which hit an energy-intensive industry like car manufacturing especially hard. 3 separate pressures. A mandate that's outpacing real demand, cheaper international competition, and rising costs, landing on the same factories at the same time. This isn't an abstract industry statistic. It's tens of thousands of jobs concentrated in specific towns that don't have an easy alternative industry to fall back on. The SMMT has explicitly warned that the sector is on the low end of its cycle, with entire communities already feeling the impact of closures at Luton, Hethel, Sunderland, Swindon and Bridgend, Towns where, for generations, the local car plant wasn't just an employer, it was the reason the town had a train station, a football club, a high street that stayed busy. And it isn't confined to UK-owned decisions either. BMW has announced plans to cut around 8,000 jobs globally as part of a wider restructuring. A reminder that even the manufacturers still committed to Britain are making these cuts against a backdrop of a global industry under the same pressure everywhere at once. The industry's own response has been consistent. The SMM has repeatedly called on government for consumer incentives to boost genuine EV demand, serious investment in charging infrastructure beyond major cities, and critically, more flexibility in the ZEV mandate itself, so manufacturers aren't penalised for a demand gap they didn't create. SMMT Chief Executive Mike Hawes has put it plainly: there's a critical link between a healthy local market and healthy local production. And right now, neither side of that equation is healthy. A new EU law taking effect at the end of 2026, alongside continued uncertainty over the UK's own mandate, has been described by industry press as the potential final blow, with manufacturers openly weighing whether to shift production outside the UK entirely if the rules aren't rewritten fast. Step back, and this is the story of an industry caught in the gap between where policy wants it to be and where the market actually is. Manufacturers are being asked to hit electric vehicle targets faster than British consumers are actually buying electric vehicles. And when the numbers don't meet in the middle, it isn't the mandate that bends. It's the factories and the towns built around them that do. Britain once built almost 1 million cars a year. Right now, it's on track to build well under half that, the lowest number in 70 years. Whether that number recovers depends on decisions being made in government offices right now about rules written for a transition that, on the ground, is moving a lot slower than the policy assumed it would.